We are descending Black Butte. Today is June 7th, 2022, and we're doing a 9.8 mile hike, 3,400 foot elevation gain. Thankfully, we are on the back half of that. Not gonna lie, the 3,400 foot was exhausting. I'm an exhausted young man. I'm not quite young, I'm 42 years old, so we'll just say an exhausted man. Today is June 7th, 2022. I am thankfully going down. Gotta say, having left Black Butte lookout area, it's actually the third time I've been here. First time I've done the full hike. So you can park in the upper section. You park in the upper section, it's 3.8 miles and 1,600 foot elevation gain. You park in the lower section, it's 9.8 and 3,400 foot elevation gain. So you add 6 miles and 1,800 feet. What's that amongst friends, right? So definitely makes it a heck of a lot more challenging. Also, if you know much about how elevation gain works, you might look at it and say, well, 1,600, 3,400, pretty much doubles it and a little beyond that, so it makes it twice as hard. It's not really how it works. Elevation gain is kind of cumulative. So since you get to a fatigue factor, even though it's twice as high, it's more than twice as difficult. It's probably more like 2.5 to 3 times as difficult, because once you start redlining and you get kind of exhausted and your legs get jello-y, rubbery, you still have to keep going. So since you can redline a bit, your elevation gain can kind of impact your fatigue level exponentially. It's not a 1-to-1 even ratio, if that makes sense. So started at the lower trailhead, came up the 4.9 miles, 3,400 feet. I'm glad that is done. It's well within my capability as the wilderness adventurer I am, but no matter how good you are or not, you get to certain thresholds where even if it's something you can handle, it's still exhausting. Like, you're still gonna have a severe fatigue. So I can definitely tell I'm going to be sore tomorrow after climbing up 3,400 feet. But I'm very glad I did it. I would recommend it. That said, sounds like I'm pretty negative, but I'm really not. It's a good feeling once you get to the top. And it says my third time to the Black Butte lookout area. I particularly recommend the Cupola Viewpoint, where you can stand and basically see 9 mountains in one spot. And they've done a very good job designing the area so it's like a nice deck-like wood deck, stained wood deck, and it's got little placards for all 9 mountains with the shape of the mountain and the elevation. So kind of a good informational spot if you really want to develop a mastery of your understanding of the Central Oregon Mountains. And let's be honest, who doesn't? So highly recommend that. The Cupola Viewpoint area, pretty epic, pretty first class and legendary. I am a fan. And we are just descending. You always got to be extra careful descending. It's nice that you can let off the exertion factor that you had to burn coming up, but you want to particularly watch your footing, because you're more likely to trip and take a fumble going down than you are going up. When you're going up, you're more deliberative with your stepping. When you're going down, you can kind of lose your situational awareness and your concentration and get kind of rubber foot complex, and before you know it, you take a step wrong and you tumble and hurt yourself. So even though it's a nice reprieve to be able to go down, my lungs are thinking me that I'm not going up. It doesn't mean that you don't maintain your safety mentality. And look at that. Getting some views of sisters as we descend north and south. South is actually on the left, north on the right. Black Butte 2 fire, 2009, 578 acres caused by lightning see kind of wrecked that particular section. Happens sometimes. Seen a little bit more bugs on the way down than I did on the way up, but none of them appear to be mosquitoes or biting bugs, just more nuisance bugs. I can live with nuisance bugs. One of the things to know about Oregon is I think a chipmunk scurries off. You know how to tell if it's a chipmunk, it's got a stripe. If it doesn't have a stripe, it's a squirrel. So that's the claim to fame of this area, is you get kind of early access to a premium mountain style hike. And the other claim to fame is because there's no water sources, there's no mosquitoes. And that may sound like a small thing, but if you understand how the Cascades are here in Oregon and Washington, actually considered kind of mosquito ground zero in the United States. And there is our friend Mount Washington, our friend Three Finger Jack, one more time. So very heavy mosquito areas, Oregon and Washington, because of all the rivers and lakes and ponds and bogs and swamps, and some areas where you just go and it's just infested and little micro vampires trying to steal all your blood. So unfortunately, a lot of those kind of activate in June. So it's kind of the paradox of Oregon and Washington, is that you get all excited to get your hike on summer, and June hits, and it's kind of the worst time of the year to hike because of all the mosquitoes. So I am hiking down a forest, essentially. Mighty Deschutes National Forest, ponderosa laden. Speaking of ponderosa, it's a pretty epic one way off in the distance there. It's gorgeous. So I did the lower trailhead today to go up to the Black Butte Summit area. Most people opt for the upper trailhead because it's a much shorter hike. It's 3.8 miles and 1,600 feet instead of 9.8 miles and 3,400 feet. It was less than half of both the distance and the elevation. The elevation being the killer. 9.8 miles to me is a pretty basic hike. It's not anything crazy. I'm very comfortable with 15, 18, 20 mile hikes in heart of summer when I'm going up in the mountains. 10 miles is pretty basic. To me, that's a daily average. But the 3,400 feet, that is a thing entirely different. That was pretty hard. So I knew I could do it. I've done much harder many times, so I knew it was within my capabilities. But no matter how good of a hiker you are, when you go up 3,400 feet in a non-stop 4.9 mile up stair climber, feel the burn, you're gonna feel it. So I was slightly wrecked from that, but bounced back well. Legs are slightly rubbery and jelly, but overall still pretty good. I mean, if I had more uphill to do, I could do it. I'm not like wrecked. I could probably throw down another 1,000 feet right now if I really had to, but I don't have to, thankfully, because I'm going downhill all the way back to the car. This is a classic uphill out and back, so some people like to call those a 2/3 hike, where you spend 2/3 of your time on the way out because you're going uphill, you're going slower, and then on your way back, because you're going downhill, you can kind of get in mop-up mode and ramp up your speed, your velocity. So I'm definitely in mop-up mode at this point, just kind of flying through this bottom section. Kind of 4 segments of this hike. You go up 3 miles and 1,800 feet. Again, the elevation is always the killer, not the mileage is pretty basic. So you go up 3 miles and 1,800, then you go up 1.9 miles and 1,600. So then you're up combined 4.9 miles and 3,400. Then you turn around and you go down 1.9 and 16. Did that, 1,600 feet. And then now I'm on the final segment, the fourth of the 4 segments, the 4 quadrants of this hike. I'm on the final 3 miles down and 1,800 feet down. So my next stop is not a waypoint. It is the trailhead in my automobile. It's also a great training run for like the season, because one of the things about this one to understand is that it's one of the first accessible ones. Today is June 7th, 2022, but it was accessible typically around the 3rd week of May, give or take, depending on that year's snow levels. So the peak is 6,355 as far as feet, and typically that level of incline or that elevation level is not accessible at the end of May in most other areas, but for whatever reason, maybe the angles of the slopes or how open this area is, whatever it is, area actually melts pretty aggressively and melts pretty fast. So if you're looking for an end of May, early June hike, Black Butte would be one of the best ones I would pick in the area. But I was starting to say that also gives you a great training hike. Like if you're like me and you're clamoring to go up in the mountains, which you kind of want to wait till August or September to do that, to do some epic alpine hiking, then you probably want to, you know, do a little bit of training if you can, and this would be a great training run. I would say this, if you can do this 3,400 foot, 9.8 miler, 3,400 foot being the more meaningful of those two metrics, then you could probably do most of the, if not all of the alpine hikes in the Central Oregon area. I've done them all, and most of them aren't, I mean, they'll have some incline, but they're normally more gradual, slighter inclines and spread out over longer distances, which makes it easier to do. So if you can do this, you're ready. So I would highly recommend it, if not anything else, just for a training run. But for me, it was also a one-time bucket list thing. Maybe this is a terrible thing to say and deter people from wanting to do it, but if you get it, you get it. It's almost a punishment hike. Like, it's just straight up the whole way. Very little reprieve. It's a great early season, kind of end of spring, early summer hike. It's kind of one of the more epic hikes you can even have, frankly, access to as far as the snow melt. There's no mosquitoes because there's no water in the area. There's no lakes or rivers or bogs or swamps in this particular section of Deschutes National Forest. So you got no mosquitoes, which is big because some of the areas mosquitoes are starting to become little micro vampires, and this is not one of those areas. So I would avoid the mosquito-laden lower elevation boggy areas and pick off a few hikes you can do that don't have the mosquito quotient.